welcome to the Homeless in San Diego podcast. This is season 4, episode 3, and you guessed it. I am not Greg Angel. I am Dr. Nate Sessoms. I am a consultant with Interfaith Community Services. I also serve as a clinical assistant professor at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. And I am joined by my esteemed co-host, Dr. Webb. Dr. Webb, I know that you are the board chair here at Interfaith, but I will pass the mic to you to continue to share in terms of your introduction.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Nate. Hello, Interfaith. Hello, everyone who's listening. And before I do that, let me give a huge shout out to Greg, our CEO, for giving us a space and allowing us this platform to share, as Dr. Nate shared with you all. Dr. Webb, I have the high privilege of serving as the chair of the board of directors here at Interfaith Community Services and just began my second term in October 2023.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I also serve as the senior pastor of the St. John Church in Oceanside, California, which is a great congregation. So if you're listening from St. John or watching this, shout out to the folks from St. John. I also serve as co-chair of the board of directors for San Diego Organizing Project and co-chair of the North County Faith-Based Partnership. Like you, I'm also teaching a little bit. So I am a teaching faculty member at Claremont Lincoln University, as well as affiliate assistant professor at Fuller Theological Seminary. So a lot going on, but Interfaith is one of those places that is at the top of my list. So glad to be here today.
Exactly. So we thought we'd do something different today, obviously. It is Black History Month. And just to set the record straight, we do not engage in all of our exploration of Black community, Black culture, and the like just in these 29 days. Every month is Black History Month. We've talked about that every day. And so we, from the top, want to encourage everyone to engage in your exploration. Just to get us started as we do something different today, Dr. Webb, could you talk about the significance of Black History Month today?
Black History Month is a representation of my identity. And so Black History Month is significant to me because it's a time where we honor those achievements on a larger scale. I honor them every day, you honor them every day, but I'm not sure that everyone else who doesn't share this identity does. And so it feels good to be in a month in a space where intentional attention is given to the accomplishments of people of African American descent, who are black, who have contributed to this country in meaningful ways. And so for me, Black History Month is a time also where I stretch myself, because just because I'm Black doesn't mean that I know all of Black history. And so I learn about various people who have contributed to society from day to day throughout Black History Month. One of my friends does something on Instagram. Every month every day he's putting up a Black history fact, but they're obscure facts. It's not those notable figures who we hear about over and over again, and that's not to steal their thunder, but it is to expand how we think about Black history and to realize that there are so many players on the field who have contributed to what is Black history and whose shoulders we stand on. So that's very, very important to me.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. I feel like when we celebrate Black History Month, you can experience a series of complex emotions. On one hand, as you engage in the breadth and depth of Black history and learning about people beyond the Dr. Kings and the Rosa Parks and the Malcolm X's, and you hear some of the stories about the ancestors and their belief in the future, a future marked by the presence of freedom, of a wide array of choices, and you think about the sacrifices that they made so that we could be here. That these people were fighting for something that they could not see, but believe that it could happen. And so that can obviously cause you to tighten up and feel a range of emotions, from anger to bitterness to just sadness. Then on the other hand, we think about our story, the story of our people, the story of our community. It's a story of resilience. It's a story of continuously fighting the good fight, again, for the sake of something that we can't entirely see, but
It's
we
the
know
good
it's
fight
there.
of justice and of faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
It makes me say, as the song says, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. I'm black and I'm proud because there's something to be said about the level of resilience that we see when we look at these Black history figures, and when we even look at our own personal lives, right? Because I am Black history. You're Black history.
Absolutely.
There may be a time down the road where we're talking about Dr. Nathan J. Sessoms, of the Loyola Marymount University and the contributions you made. And so when you look at the resilience that is characteristic of our people, that is something to be celebrated. Absolutely. Something that should not be understated. Right. And for me, it informs and shapes my self-concept. It shapes how I approach life. It shapes how I approach situations. And it makes me walk with my shoulders square in a sense of confidence, knowing that there isn't very much I cannot overcome. Yeah.
I appreciate you adding to that point, because we can acknowledge the range of emotions that we feel, but at the end of the day, the pride that comes along with, and we've talked about this too, understanding who you are, right? It's important that people do their research, and we can speak about that from a broad perspective, that everyone should be working to better understand Black history, because Black history is American history, but just to engage in terms of knowledge gathering, but for Black people to continue to dig into our history and in doing so, learn more about who you are, so that you can walk with a requisite level of confidence, so that you can, as the instances of racism and discrimination come your way, that this isn't the first time this has happened.
Oh no.
And you can keep it moving and persevere.
Oh no, absolutely. What we see, and I don't want to turn the conversation in that direction just yet, what we see against Black people is nothing new.
Right.
It's nothing new, but it's rooted in my estimation, truly an understanding and an admiration that there's something very resilient about these people.
Absolutely.
So I won't turn it that way just yet. I mean, I hear you. I'm following your pace.
Got started early.
You did start kind of early. I thought we were going to kind of
we'll dial it back. We'll dial it back so we can ease into that. So obviously, we are co-hosting the Homeless in San Diego podcast, and we were talking about the statistic that I think it was in 2022. There was a study done, and I think it was a regional task force
on homelessness.
Here in San Diego, and the statistic was like 28% of the homeless population. Blacks make up 28%, but they only make up 5% of the overall population, right? Which is a glaring statistic. So we can certainly talk about the extent to which racism, the long-standing legacy of redlining, blockbusting, and the like. We can certainly talk about that. But today, rather than go there, we wanted to engage in authentic conversation about Black History Month as we started. I'm going to be asking Dr. Webb a number of questions about his experiences in Black leadership, and we'll certainly have some dialogue around the challenges associated with, not associated with the history, but challenges that we've seen throughout history, as we talked about, but also the joy that comes along with acknowledging our history and that level of resilience we talked about. So, having said that, per the Associations for African American Life and History, for those that don't know, ASALH, the organization, provides the theme every year for Black History Month. So this is the organization that was founded by Carter G. Woodson, who is the father of Negro History Week, Black History Month. Carter G. Woodson, second Black person to graduate from Harvard with his PhD. If you don't know Carter G. Woodson, please take the time to learn about him. He is an outstanding figure in our community, in our history. He wrote an amazing book called The Miseducation of the Negro.
Miseducation, yeah.
Please pick that up and take a look at it. It's an amazing book. But the theme this year for Black History Month is African Americans and the Arts. And as I share that theme, any thoughts? Do any thoughts come to your mind about the significance of that theme for this year's Black History Month?
Well, arts are cultural to who we are. So if you look at African culture, dancing and drumming and music and making pottery and artifacts. Those are things that are innate to the cultural experience of people who are black.
Right.
That is one of the only areas that we find where there is a real broad measure of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that's significant,
agree.
is that there is the art space creates space for black people to express themselves without as much consequence, negative consequence, as you would see in other sectors of life. And so I think that's a very,
That's a great point.
very interesting and intentional move on the part of Asala to bring our attention to that. I also think that arts, again, are our culture, and that during Black History Month, we should not just focus ourselves on facts, but we should be reaching deeply into ourselves for a cultural understanding, and even stretching ourselves, even as black people, for cultural immersion that we have not experienced, right? There are elements of black culture that, because I'm so many generations removed from certain things, I've not experienced. And so that this, in my mind, when I heard that theme, I began to challenge myself in those areas. What were they eating? Listen to some different music. Experience different dancing. You know, look at these things and see that this is something that you are descended from.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Great points. Appreciate that. When I think about the theme, and I appreciate your comments so much, because it's exactly sort of where I was thinking about what I was thinking, which was if you are ever wondering about the story, if you haven't had the opportunity to read books like The Miseducation of the Negro, or Souls of Black Folk by W.B. Du Bois, or Black Reconstruction in the United States by Du Bois, and if you haven't read James Baldwin or Zora Neale Hurston, or individuals who have told those stories, you know, in a lot of our music, right? You reference James Brown on Black and I'm Proud. You know, you can look at a lot of great black artists who are engaging. Ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, this is about storytelling, right? This is about, you know, we don't necessarily have the type of freedom that we deserve and should have, rightfully earned, to tell our story the way it should be told. And so we are going to turn to these different platforms to tell our story. Whether you're thinking about an Alvin Ailey in the world of dance, or you're thinking about and people like Debbie Allen, if you're thinking about Diane Carroll, Paul Robeson, there's so many individuals, and you know, today with Ava DuVernay and so many young creatives that are telling stories. You know, part of our culture is storytelling, right? And because of what happened with enslavement, you know, a lot of our history has been lost. So you mentioned that immersion, going back and learning all that we can about who we are, is central to I believe the Black experience.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Webb, in your introduction, you were talking about the fact that you serve as board chair, and this is your second term. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I know that there are a number of amazing things that are happening around interfaith. A number of them have been happening in the past few years. Obviously, I've been associated with interfaith for the last few years. But are there noteworthy accomplishments, you know, as you think about your beginning your second term, as you look back and you say, wow, these are great things that have happened, you know, under my leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. So Interfaith is a very large organization, and we're very proud of that. We make so many investments into the lives of people. So we have 20,000 plus people that we're serving annually, of all walks of life, ages, ethnicities, sexual orientations, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm proud of the fact that we've continued to serve so many people through our various programs and have helped people on a path to wholeness and a better standard of living where they are most challenged. Obviously, my role is with the board, so it's on the board side and the strategic side of setting the pace
Right.
for the organization in partnership with our CEO. And one of the things that I am most proud of, when I came to this board in 2016, I walked into a boardroom of all Caucasian people in 2016. Here we are 7+ years later, and there's a measure of diversity at that board table. And while we're talking about Black History Month, I'm not just talking about Black folks, right? I'm talking about various ethnicities, various ages, various industries, so that we can have the most diverse set of skill sets to make the best possible decisions that impact people's lives. And so I'm very proud of that. That began to take a turn after George Floyd's murder. And I was not the chair then, I was the vice chair, and the board made a decision to make some adjustments after that. And I was asked to really help keep us accountable in that regard and to help us with looking at what we needed for our board. So again, it wasn't just ethnicity, right? Ethnicity is a part of it, but we needed more young people, right? We've got a young, innovative, talented CEO. You know, you don't need a bunch of people who are of one age group and one mindset sitting at the table, right? You need an array. You need the wisdom of the elders and the innovation and the drive of the young folks and kind of the sobriety of the middle-aged folks. And you need all that at the table. So I think that's what I'm most proud of. I am proud also of what appears to be the challenges that brings. You have said to us several times in your work with us as a consultant that conflict is inherent in this work. It may sound like a strange thing to say, but I'm proud of the conflict because that separates what we say in my faith tradition, the wheat from the tare. And part of moving together, sometimes those separations have to be made. And there's no love lost. It's just how can two walk together lest they agree? So for those who share my faith tradition, that may sound familiar, right? There are certain things we cannot do together if we just simply don't agree. So I'm very, very proud, very, very proud of that. I also think that with that comes a greater level of innovation and drive and room for our CEO and our staff who works very hard to take us to our next place. So I think that's just what I'm most proud of is, hey, we've brought a diverse group of skill sets to this table, and we're on a good pathway forward.
Outstanding. I would echo your sentiments. I'm extremely proud of the work as it's grown within Interfaith around diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. Sometimes that stance that we have to take, which obviously we've seen in Black community, that stance is taken over and over and over again by necessity, right? And that can be difficult. I think one of the things I'm most proud of about the organization, and obviously your leadership is a huge part of that, is that the organization has taken this bold stance to say we are going to stand up against injustice. We are going to serve the most vulnerable and be proud of it, and we're not going to be quiet about it. It needs to happen, especially when we think about that glaring statistic of 28% and only 5% of the overall population. That's a problem. And as we know, problems don't get solved by continuing to say that this is a problem.
No.
Right? So whenever we stand up and state that there's a problem, there can be discomfort in that. And when we go one step further and say we are out to address the problem, there can be even more discomfort with that. So, I'm certainly proud of Interfaith. I'm proud of the work that I get to do with Interfaith. I've learned a great deal. And I would agree with you. I think, you shared that, not to paraphrase, but, that the conflict is there. And the only way that we can deal with that is to engage with it, right? There is no way to kind of dance around it.
Yeah, I mean, there is no way to do that. I mean, you can do that in the most emotionally intelligent way possible, but there's no way around it. And I don't want to go this way. I've been thinking through this because I'm just in my mind recalling some of the conflict that comes with the work in general. And Interfaith is no different than any other organization that makes a bold stance and says, hey, this is the direction we're going. We have had our share of challenges as well. but we have a good group of people who are committed to a cause far greater than conflict. You know, if I had to put a tagline, it's committed to the cause, right? Beyond the conflict, right? It's not about the conflict. Conflict is running from the conflict is to live in comfort. To live in comfort is to perpetuate privilege, right? Exactly. And we could just go on and on and on and on and on. But I'm kind of musing and thinking about some of the conflicts and the things that have come up. And I think that one of the things that we could do as we hear a conversation about Blackness, about Black History, about Black History Month, with an open mind, is to refuse to be dissonant. So a lot of that conflict is rooted in dissonance and a denial of just truth and reality. So numbers don't lie. Statistics don't lie. So if you share a statistic with me from the Regional Task Force on Homelessness, which, by the way, is led by people who don't look like us. Right. So we're not putting their credibility on line, right? There's a statistic, right? 28% of the homeless, or 22%, I don't want to misquote it, are African American. 28%. Let me make sure I get that right for the audience here. 28% is homeless. 5% of the general population is African American. Right. Those numbers don't lie, right? And the question has to be raised. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but I'll just whet the appetite with it. The question has to be raised. Okay, why? Why is that? Right? Okay, there might be a system in place, right? And I know some of the stereotypes. You know, I'll say them. I can say them because I'm Black, right? All right. Black folks don't want to work. That's not really true.
It's not true at all.
It's not true at all, right? Black people don't have a history of not working. Black people worked their own land before they were brought here to the United States during the transatlantic slave trade. They worked during slavery. And in the words of Angela Rye, if she ever watches this, shout out to Angela Rye, we built this joint for free. So it's not an issue of a mindset or perpetuating a stereotype. Right. It might be that there are some issues with access. It might be that there are some things that are happening to try to make one group of people rise to a certain place while keeping another group of people down.
Absolutely.
Right. So I don't want to get into that because I'm sure that already has offended somebody. Right. But again, Interfaith is taking a bold stance against these things, right? There's room for everybody. That's right. There is, and I'm not a victim. I can think about my own life, and I can think about my own experience coming up. I'm not a victim. I'm a terminally degreed Black man. Like, that's a miracle, right? I know we have interfaith people, but I'll say in my future, I thank God. I thank the Lord Jesus Christ for that, right? So I'm not a victim. I'm not someone who feels like, you know, oh my gosh, I'm at the bottom of the barrel and, you know, I just can't climb out. I worked, but I had to work harder because there were so many things. We didn't have access to the same things, right? So when I come into a room, yeah, I do see it a little differently than someone else who hasn't had to do that. And that doesn't mean that that person is wrong for being who they are. What is wrong is when you don't acknowledge who someone else is, right? I can't control I'm Black. I say this all the time. There are people can't control they're white. There are people can't control they're Asian or brown. We don't get to pick what color we are, what ethnicity we are. Right. I become wrong when I discount who you are.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole, but this whole notion of conflict being inherent in the work is just sometimes, you know, you hear it and it's just ridiculous. And you know, I know you asked me about my leadership experience. Like, I'll say it, like I've had to deal with that in the boardroom. You know, I've had to, you know, work through those challenges. You know, we make decisions and we have to be accountable for those decisions as a group of people, because again, these decisions impact lives. So in leadership, right, I've had to deal with that level of dissonance as well. And that's what makes leading in these Black spaces so exhausting at times. Right? That's how I know we are resilient, right? To the fact that we can continue to do it. And because there's something greater, a greater cause, what's exhausting is you're not just executing the functions of your office or the duties of your office. You're constantly dealing with dissonance that is rooted in privilege and a denial of one's history that is something that they are less than proud of. I'll be quiet there. I know you have a bunch more questions. So, you know, once you get me started on a tangent, it's like, I'll just keep going and going.
I appreciate the words that you're using as you explain. One, you know, I think anytime we share about our own experiences, we make ourselves vulnerable, and that's not something that's easy to do. So certainly appreciate you sharing that. I also, when you talked about people discounting who other people are, I think for me, when I have encountered that, and when I see it as a consultant, it's a very quick indicator that someone doesn't know who they are. When you can discount, it's easy to discount someone else when you don't know who you are. So that is why we were talking earlier, and was understand who you are. For all people, it's best to understand who you are.
I mean, and we could talk about this even when we think about interfaith, right? Interfaith was founded, and I'll push us to our history, right? And we've talked about our history. Interfaith was founded in 1979 by a group of interfaith leaders as a direct response to white supremacy, as a direct rebuke against the Ku Klux Klan at the time, right? What is troubling about where we are now, not interfaith, but just society in general, is the fact that, again, this dissonance has risen, and now faith is used as a weapon and not as a tool of empowerment. Now, I will say this as an authority. I am a trained homiletician, so I know the art of preaching. I've been trained to like, this is my sector, this is where I work, right? So I'm more trained than some people who might be watching this. That's my sector, where they may be trained in social work. Like, I'm not saying that to exalt myself, because humility is something that is absolutely the right virtue to hold at the center of your life. Don't think more highly of yourself than you are. All that to say, I know what I'm talking about when I speak here. The reality is now faith has been weaponized. We're talking about interfaith, which is a group of various faith communities that come together around our mission, right? We have member congregations. We have people who support us. Even some of those congregations, and I know nobody might not like this, but I'll say it, have weaponized faith and have stances, and this is where the rubber's gonna meet the road, and I'm being very prophetic here, right? Have stances that are counter to what we're doing right now. Privilege just allows them to hide, right? So we're weaponizing faith, but there's no faith tradition, none whatsoever. If we read these sacred scriptures, accurately, or sacred text, I should say, to use the right term, there is no sacred text that gives any faith group license to discriminate, to oppress, or to do any of that. There is none whatsoever. If you read the Holy Quran, which the Muslims use, there's nothing in there that will allow that. If you read the Holy Bible, which Christians use, right? The Bible speaks about due justice. You want to see my shirt today? I feel like, I don't know if they can get this on the camera. So I haven't had this shirt on for a while. I got to kind of stay at the mic. So I haven't had this on for a while, but one of the members brought this for me. And it says racial justice is revival. This is in the Bible. It talks about doing justice on my back right now. Right. So if you're a congregation and you're into this whole nationalism and, some of the things that we see, I'm not telling you who to vote for or anything like that. I can't do that. But we can't keep using faith as a crutch to do these things. And then on the flip side, feel like we're doing charity when we come to interfaith, but we're really not interested in helping people come all the way up. So the next place, to be honest, of challenge, not for interfaith, but for the congregations who make themselves a part of interfaith, is really doing that work within themselves. That's why this work is so powerful, because interfaith is clear. Our board, our CEO, we're clear. Now our member congregations have to decide, okay, where am I at? And I'd be doing an injustice if I didn't use this space to say, this is what happens in the leadership role when this kind of work is happening. The final thing I would say about that is, when you are leading this type of work from the front, just by default, because you're the board chair, people identify you with the work. So I've had that happen, right? It's my work. It's not my work. It's society's work. It's not even just interfaith work. It's society's work.
Right. Particularly for a black man in leadership.
Right.
Right. As a black man, and I don't know if I missed you saying black man, but surely as a leader in the work, but as a black leader in the work.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. And I wasn't trying to cut you off.
We're just talking, bro. We're just talking, man.
want to dig a little bit deeper into that statistic that we started with, the 28%, to use it as a segue into a conversation that we've had, certainly, and I'm sure others have had it, but as we transition out of the boardroom out into communities where Interfaith is doing amazing work, there is this tendency, and you were sort of taking us down that path, that Black people are lazy, Black people don't want to work, Black, right? And people have utilized that, surely for the Black community and the impoverished Black communities, but other people of color for sure. One of the things that I know we've talked about and that Interfaith is really focused on is through the great work that happens in our programs, and shout out to Felipe Rios, who chief program officer, does amazing work. But yes, there's work happening on the ground to meet the existing need, but the true work, right, is actually systems change.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, and that's the part that as we've talked and as we've been talking within Interfaith, that a lot of people don't see. So I just want to put that on the table, and we can dialogue around.
Well,
that.
They see it, they're challenged by it, because changing the system means changing my status. So I see it, I'm just challenged by it, right? So if, I remember a comment was made a while back when we began this work, and you may recall this comment. It may stick out to some who are listening to this who may have been a part of the conversation. Well, where are my sons and my sons-in-law going to work if all the Black people get jobs? That is one of the most abhorrent things to say in the world, but it's rooted in ignorance
and fear,
right? And fear that if the system changes whereby my children are on the top and someone else is given space, they're losing their status. When the reality is there are enough jobs to give some Black folks and some brown folks and some other folks jobs. And your kids can still maintain their jobs. Systems change doesn't mean that anybody is necessarily saying that you shouldn't have anything. It's just saying maybe somebody else should have something too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and those are the challenges when people hear the word equity and they cover their ears, and it's like people don't have to be afraid of equity, right? I often use the analogy. People tend to look at equity like it's college financial aid, where if you're early in the process, there's plenty of money in the financial aid bucket, right? But we know it's a finite amount of money. The well is going to dry up. So if you go to the financial aid office a day before the deadline, you might find some lint and a couple of quarters, right? So that money's going to run out.
Right.
Equity's not going to run out in this country. There's enough room and enough resources for everybody to live full and fair lives.
Well, I don't even know that people understand what equity is. Right. Now you've got people who, under the facade of allyship, are hollering equality. Right.
And we've that was a conversation we were having in this country in the 60s.
Exactly.
Right. About everybody getting an opportunity. Right. For those of you who go through the history, you'll see the great Reverend James Lawson, who walked and talked with Dr. King, and still to this day he's 90. He's 5 years old. He's still preaching at Home United Methodist Church in Los Angeles. He's an amazing man. Check out James Lawson if you get a chance. But people walking around with signs saying "I am a man," right? That idea that I am a human being, I deserve to be treated as such, and therefore I deserve access and opportunity. I would certainly say that we've moved forward to a place where we're talking about equity. Right, and equity better meets the needs of those who've been oppressed and marginalized, because if you start off behind everybody else, equality really doesn't help you a whole lot. I mean, it helps you, but it doesn't help to get you where it is you really are trying to go. Equity is about providing the most resources to those who are most in need of them.
That acknowledges the fact that where we start is not all at the same place.
Exactly. Right. Exactly, for sure.
It acknowledges the system, that where I started and where someone else may have started are two totally different things, right?
Right.
I mean, totally different.
And not of someone's choosing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we don't get to choose what neighborhood we're born into.
Right.
We don't get to choose the family we're born into.
Right.
We don't get to choose how much savings.
I didn't choose that they put drugs in our neighborhoods
Exactly.
or anything like that.
Exactly.
And I've watched, I'll say it, I've watched people in the community at home, like heroin addicts, good, well-intentioned people. I can recall as a child watching funeral cars ride up and down the street. We were a very tight-knit community, right? Because people had died from, like, utilizing drugs. They didn't just land there. Drugs cost money. If we want to really run down, and I'm not going to run down that. Drugs cost money.
Exactly.
So if black folks don't have money to get the drugs, somebody planted the drugs with the intention of oppressing a group of people. Like, so I don't want to get into all that. And again, not a victim mentality, just reality. So as we talk about Black History Month, these are the kinds of conversations we ought to be having, not just about, who was Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He deserves to be honored. Who was Malcolm X? Who was Medgar Evers? Who was Rosa Parks? Who was Jane Bolin? Who was Hiram Revels? We don't need to be having those conversations as much as we need to be thinking and being open to some of these other conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think that this conversation around systems is one where we, to your point, we can have both can happen and are happening at the same time. So we have services being provided, we're meeting the need on the ground, but we also can have conversations around, to your point, how did we get here? How did this happen? And most of the time when we look back in history, these are about policy decisions. These are about processes. These are about procedures that work to benefit some communities and work to the detriment of Black communities and other communities of color. So those are the real conversations that that happen for sure in the Black community. They happen well beyond Black History Month. But I'm excited about the fact that interfaith is on course to have those conversations.
Oh, absolutely. It's a bold decision and a bold step, and one that should not be understated. Like, it's a bold decision, to say the absolute least. Interfaith ought to be applauded for taking that first step, and ought to be challenged to continue taking those steps, and ought to be challenged to move beyond the tense areas and the fragile areas, because those will come on the journey. To continue making sure that momentum is certainly maintained.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
When Interfaith steps out and says that we are striving to be an anti-racist organization, people immediately come running towards you and say, "Oh, what did you do this? Well, where's this? And what is this? And what is this?" And please understand that there are no perfect organizations. Just like there are no perfect people. But it does mean that interfaith is striving for perfection. And what we find is when people strive for perfection, you can, on a regular basis, land at excellence.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And that is the sincere hope, and that's where this work is leading. And so I agree, interfaith should be applauded for standing up, right? As we like to say, speak up, stand up, and show up for justice. And when we were talking about equity, a word that is used in the Black community regularly, if we think about people like James Cone, if you don't know James Cone.
Oh, Father, Black Liberation Theology.
Black Liberation Theology, the word liberation, right? So now we're in a space where we're talking about, we can have a conversation about equity with our eyes on liberation.
Yeah.
Right? And that is, I would say, part of what we talk about as the post-George Floyd era, where people are standing up. If you pay close attention in society, people are pushing, they are challenging rules and sets of norms that have long been debated, but people now aren't really hesitant anymore or fearful anymore to say, you are not going to talk to me like that. You're not going to treat me like that anymore. I will not stand for this, that, and the other.
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And so I like the fact, I love the fact that interfaith is right on par with that through this work. So if we were to think about having talked about this amazing work, and we started this conversation around you starting your second term, any goals or things that you think about, next steps or things that you like to accomplish going forward? Obviously, continuing this work for sure, but anything else that you've thought about?
It's not a quantitative goal, but it's a qualitative goal to see us move beyond the dissonance.
Okay.
So just because the organization is doing the work doesn't mean that every trace of racist behavior is gone, every trace of bias is gone, that every implicit bias is removed from somebody's mind. So for me, a qualitative accomplishment would see people, can I just say it frankly, stop lying and be open and honest and stop taking everything so personally. So just because there are elements of history that groups of people are not proud of, not necessarily blaming any one person, but you are a perpetuator of it if you are dissonant, if you don't tell the truth, if you do not take the time to have the conversation, you are just as guilty. You know, you could, and this might be too forward, you could, let me just keep it real clean, because I don't want to upset nobody, because even, like, seriously, everybody's real fragile. You know, everybody's fragile but the black folks. But I guess if you've been beat to death for your whole life, literally or figuratively, your back gets strong. So, you know, and I don't mean that to be rude to anybody, but it's just a reality. So I'm trying to censor here for you all's sake, because I mean, I can handle it, right? When some of these people who we are appealing to and reaching out to now and having a real conversation with, you're not literally saying the N-word overtly, but covertly in your day-to-day living. You with your dissonance are suggesting that we're literally dumb enough to believe the pipe dream that we've been sold. You know, so those are things. You know, I think those things really need to be considered, and I think we again are trying to appeal to that, appeal to conscience. As a man of faith, you know, I'm appealing to the consciences of those who hear. There's no faith tradition that allows us to treat people any type of way. There's no faith tradition that allows us to marginalize or oppress. I said it earlier in this podcast. There's no faith tradition that makes room for that. The golden rule is called the golden rule because it is something that we find in various faiths. That's what I would call us to do. We typically end with a call to action. I'll drop one. Dr. Nate may have one. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I'm pausing because we need to let that marinate. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I'll say it one more time. How would you feel if the shoe were on the other foot? And every time you went to climb, somebody stepped on your fingers. How would you feel if someone said all manner of evil against you and you were trying to do the best you can? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So that's where I'll land today.
And I appreciate those sentiments and that and that call to action. I would simply add to that. I would urge people to understand, as we started the podcast, by saying that by no means is the exploration of Black culture, Black history, and Black life confined to 29 days. So if you are truly interested in engaging with colleagues, friends, fellow parishioners, Black people in society, take the time first to do some research, right? You know, most of us have cell phones. You can access book lists. You can go to
Reputable book lists.
Yeah, that's true. Reputable.
We doctors.
Right, exactly.
You know, we say that in all our classes
Exactly.
when we teach. You got to get reputable sources.
Examine the text. Examine the text. But take that first step. Take that first step. You know, there are a number of foundational texts that you can read, and they have a lot of information in them. I'll just throw one out there. Letter from Birmingham Jail. It's classic. It is arguably the most important text of the civil rights movement. Read that.
Yeah.
Read it. Engage with it. Just continue to do your homework, and continue to take each day as an opportunity to become a better version of yourself.
You know, I just want to say that when I think about this, we're talking about Black History Month today, and the contributions of Black people and the legacy of Black people. And I'd like to even think the potential and the hope that is there for Black people because it's Black History Month. But in my role as chair of this board, as someone who is a faith leader, community leader, I am acutely aware that there are more than just Black people that I'm leading. There are more than just Black lives that I'm impacting. And so my commitment is to continue to lead with the greater good in mind. I'll say this to you, and this is the most personal I will get today. I see you. I want you to see me. If I can see all of you, Black, brown, Asian, Indian, older, middle age, younger, it'd be nice to be seen too. Because at the end of the day, what binds us together are the cords of humanity. Yeah.
Powerful words.
Thank you,
Powerful
bro.
words.
Thank you.
If by chance this conversation that we've had today has made anyone out there who may be listening uncomfortable, that's probably a good thing. Would urge you to sit in that discomfort. And the reason that I say that, we say that, is because a lot of people don't know this, but oftentimes the result of discomfort is growth. So, invest in your own growth. Sit in that discomfort. Ask yourself some tough questions. Perhaps take a look in the mirror, and see if there's a direction you want to go again toward becoming a better version of yourself. So, Dr. Webb, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Appreciate you co-hosting
Good to see you,
on the
brother.
Homeless in San Diego podcast today. Shout out to Greg for, again, giving us the space to have this very important conversation.
Shout out to Greg.
During Black History Month. Thank you, Greg. And again, thank you, my friend, for this outstanding conversation.
Yes, sir. Shout out to Interfaith. We love you all.